What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over several tips that will hopefully make it easier for you to get wins and get more crowns in Fortnite Star Wars Galactic Battle. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, find it helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and comment down below how many crown wins you've gotten so far this season. The first bit of advice I have sounds very obvious, but it's just going to be to land somewhere that you enjoy and that you are comfortable with. One way that this season differs from a lot of the past year or so of Fortnite is that the medallions aren't really that overpowered or that impactful, so you don't really need to have a heavy priority on these. And the same for the mythic weapons. A lot of them are nice to have and they're great, but it's not going to be make or break for your game, like how some of the exotics and mythics were last season. So anywhere you feel comfortable landing, go for it. You don't need to heavily prioritize a certain POI or a certain section of the map. And then this results in the lobby being a lot more spread out, I feel like, than what we've had in a lot more recent seasons. So you can get some great POIs, not really that contested. And there are a lot of great kind of unknown or unnamed, loot spots in Chapter 6 that you can take advantage of and not feel as bad about it this season because there isn't as many objectives to go for. When it comes to loot you want to carry and what items I enjoy using, my personal favorite loadout this season is going to be the ACP pump shotgun, the F11 blaster as a kind of close to medium range spray weapon, and then the IQ A11 sniper for long range, heals, and then shockwave grenades for mobility. I also like to run the ACP pump shotgun, the A280 blaster for medium to long range, which is going to be the, red dot AR of this season, a healing item, shockwaves, and then the final slot, just pretty much whatever you want, maybe bunkers, maybe EMPs, a lightsaber for extra mobility, just depending on, what I want in that match and what I have access to. But I think most of the weapons this season are really viable. So if you prefer the DC-15 or you prefer the DT-19 or even the pistol in place of some of these other spray weapons, that's perfectly fine. You can kind of swap them out. If you like the DT-19 instead of the F11 blaster, or you like the pistol instead of it, you can swap it into that first loadout, no problem. I think they did a really good job this season making most of the blasters viable, so whatever you enjoy using will work, but I would highly recommend, obviously carrying heals so you can heal during the course of the game, and also some sort of mobility and maybe utility item to help you win more fights. The radio towers are still going to be a part of the season, and if you do want to get wins and you want to make it easier for yourself to win, capturing this radio tower or forecast tower is going to give you a huge advantage. So the guards will spawn at the tower 30 seconds into second zone, but you can see the towers on the map from the moment the game starts. They have set spawn locations, and then whether or not the tower spawns at a specific spot can somewhat vary game to game. But as I said, the guards spawn 30 seconds into second zone. You eliminate the guards, you put the, key card in the computer at the tower, and then what this will do is give you zone reveal for one zone in advance for the remainder of the game. And if you want to win, this makes it easier for you to know where you want to put yourself and what areas of the map you want to control. If you see a mountain, that would be a good spot to be, but you have forecast and see that it's not going to be in the next zone, you don't really have to worry about controlling or fighting for it. You could just go and rotate to whatever the next zone is going to be. So the radio towers just allow you to be one step ahead of the lobby, and with there only being 2 that spawn per game, if you get this advantage, you should have an easier time playing than most of the other players in the lobby, if not all of them, because sometimes they go unclaimed or the person who gets it ends up getting eliminated. A lot of times these guards will also drop a chug jug, which could be really helpful if you're landing at one of the lesser loot spots. If you're landing at an unnamed location to have a safe landing, you may not get as much loot, so that chug jug could be, helpful for supplementing your lack of loot and giving you a better healing item that you might not have had otherwise. One of the biggest ways, or in my opinion, the biggest way this season differs from a lot of other recent seasons, in addition to just being Star Wars blasters, is going to be that this season has much less mobility than what we've seen. There is mobility items, there's shockwaves, and then there's these Star Wars lightsabers that have movement aspects. But if you compare this to last season with the drill, the ram, the rift launcher, the bat, season 1 with the void mask, and there was so much in the typhoon blade, there's so much mobility in recent seasons, whereas this one has a lot more tame mobility, and so that affects how you need to play this season, I think, more so than anything. Because of this lack of mobility, cars are going to be even more impactful than they have been. cars have been incredibly important since like chapter 5 onward in zero build, but this season is no different. I would highly recommend having a car this season because using that to travel around the map could help you save some mobility, but also reduce your chances of getting caught off guard, which I'll kind of get to later on in the video. But I would highly recommend taking advantage of cars this season. If your car is weak, get it to a gas station and refuel and heal it, or just, learn the car spawns around the map and be able to swap them. They are very, very, very important this season. But also, you need to be more mindful of the fights you're taking this season. With less mobility in the game, getting third-partied is more problematic. And we do have shockwaves, which are a good item for resetting fights or maybe getting out of a bad situation. But they're harder to come by this season with the black markets not existing and some other, NPCs not selling them. As of the time I record this, maybe that changes. But as of now, shockwaves are harder to come by. So every time you have to use it, it matters more. Last season, you could kind of just use them 24/7 and not care because you could go to a black market and restock. So with the lack of mobility or mobility being harder to get, I think you need to be more mindful of the fights you're taking and more willing to let people run away. This doesn't mean that you can't play aggressive. I still play pretty aggressive, but you need to just have a bit more reserve and be willing to let people leave more so this season rather than wasting several shocks just to chase a kill. I know it sucks. I want to chase that kill too, but if you do want to win, conserving your mobility a bit more and not getting yourself in those terrible like chain third-party situations can be really helpful. And this also applies to healing items too. Like heals aren't incredibly scarce, but they're more scarce than they were last season because there's not the black markets to just go to and full stock up whenever you want, and there's not vaults everywhere dropping a bunch of loot. There's a good amount of heals on the map, but there's not as much as there was last season, and that makes conserving your heals, I feel like, matter a bit more than it did last season. Keeping those resources, I think, matters more this season. This lack of mobility, I think, also makes the radio towers a bit more valuable, especially when it comes to endgame, because if there's an absurd amount of mobility in the game, then knowing zone is helpful, but it's not as helpful as when there's less mobility because it's harder for you to move around the map. The next thing I'm going to talk about is going to be that this season is very punishing because the IQA11 sniper or DMR is incredibly lethal. Headshots with this item will deal 120 damage to 150-ish damage, depending on the rarity you have. I think the mythic tops out at 148. So one headshot is a game changer with this item, right? And then the A280 blaster has basically no recoil, and so a lot of players are able to just beam you with it. And so getting caught in any sort of unfavorable timing or, anytime you're caught out in the open is going to really, really matter this season. You need to be more disciplined about not exposing yourself to multiple angles. This kind of goes back to, being mindful of the fights you're taking. But anytime you're standing still for too long or you're putting yourself in a situation where you're exposed to a lot of angles is more detrimental this season than last, I think, because of how incredibly powerful that DMR is and how easy to use the A280 is. So you need to be a bit more disciplined, I think, in that. And this is another reason why cars are incredibly helpful, because if you need to travel in a wide open area and you have a car, you're chilling. If somebody's hiding, them catching you off guard isn't that big of a deal if you're in a car. But if you're on foot, somebody just randomly hiding in the most, unpredictable location can hit you with one DMR headshot. And now you're at around 100 health left, and they might just be like shocking on you and closing that kill. So like you can die really quick this season. Try to be more disciplined about, what angles you're exposed to, how you're traveling, if you're standing still for too long. If you're fighting, you don't want to get too tunnel vision on that if it's like a medium to long range fight because you're making yourself exposed to other enemies. And I also really don't like carrying the medallions as of right now in this season because the spaceships are a thing, which we'll get to in a moment. But anytime I carry the, Captain Phasma medallion, I feel like I'm just getting constantly like attacked by random spaceships throughout the course of the game. And you can definitely beat these spaceships and survive that fight. But it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. Do you want to waste 3 shockwaves and 2 big pots to fight a spaceship that you probably wouldn't have ended up fighting if you didn't take that medallion? That's really not that helpful anyways. I just think the benefits of the medallions aren't the greatest this season. And putting yourself on the map matters more when we have these spaceships in the game. And because of how lethal the weapons are, like I was just talking about, someone knowing where you are and just kind of remaining hidden to try to catch timing on you with that DMR can be the end of your game, even if you are much better than that player. So I would recommend not taking the medallions this season. I don't think they massively increase your chances to win in the same way that putting yourself on the map can negatively affect your chances to win. Two things I want to talk about not relying on is one going to be lightsaber melee. With Chapter 6 Season 1 and Chapter 6 Season 2, we had incredibly powerful melee weapons with the blade and the bat, and some people became very reliant on this as their only option in close range or their ideal way to start a fight. The lightsaber can get kills, but it's not as overpowered as these other weapons were as a melee weapon. And so I would recommend not relying on it too much. And if you were someone who was using a lot of those melee weapons, this is something you may need to adjust to. And I'm sure a lot of you can vouch in the comments that it has been so easy to deal with anybody relying on the lightsaber this season. And then the other thing is going to be these spaceships. And this one might seem interesting. I'm not saying don't use them, but you don't want to rely on this too much or use it constantly. Because you leave yourself very vulnerable to getting attacked by other players in the lobby. You might, be getting free kills in the spaceship, but other players around you are going to be shooting your spaceship out, and this could create bad timing. And as I touched on before, that DMR, the A280, they're so lethal that just timing can ruin your game if your spaceship gets shot out at a bad time. And think about it like this. You guys have probably played several matches this season. How many games are the spaceships actually in the end game? In my matches, they're pretty much never in the end game. I don't know if I've seen a single match where end game comes, it's like top 5 in a small zone and the spaceships are still in use. They're usually all destroyed by then because they can be shot from such like a wide range and they don't have the most HP. So while they can be good and they're, good for getting kills, the later you get in the game, you might want to consider ditching them because you do make yourself a target for the rest of the lobby in the same way that the medallions kind of do as well. I also wouldn't really recommend going for island this season. If you need extra loot, that's one thing, or if you just want to go up there to control position, that's one thing. But going up there to fight Shogun X, I don't really think is worthwhile. This was also the case last season, but again, if you're up there fighting Shogun X and somebody, gets up onto one of the other islands and you don't realize, all it could take is 2 headshots from that DMR and you're gone, or 1 headshot and you're very weak and they're probably pushing you. Same thing goes with the A280. Catching somebody off can be an easy elimination, on top of the fact that Shogun X just takes a while to fight and isn't really worthwhile because the pistol is great, but it's not like so much better than the other items that I really want to use it or I want to deal with Shogun X to fight it. And then the same goes for that medallion, the shield medallion that gives you a bubble when you're healing. I didn't think it was good last season. I still don't think it's good this season. So I just really wouldn't recommend going up there to defeat Shogun X. If you want to go up there to be up there and maybe get angles on people, that's one thing. But having a huge priority on Shogun X, I still don't think it's worth it. And in endgame, as always, it's kind of ideal to play for positioning more than anything else and be mindful of how many players are left alive. If you're in a very dead lobby, you can maybe focus a bit more on getting kills. But if it's still like 5 people up in its moving zone, getting 1 elimination isn't going to win you the game in the same way as if it's like that's the final player, If there's several people left alive and you're not going to be able to end the game in a certain zone, you probably want to just focus more on rotating and getting to the new safe area and getting deep into that new safe area. That way everyone else isn't just jumping on you. And if you're fighting while the zone is moving, somebody else is probably getting ahead of zone and making the rest of their game so much easier, making you an easy target. So if the lobby is very dead and you can win the game off a kill, awesome. But once you get into those moving zones, focus more on positioning, focus more on zone. As always, when it comes down to like a 1v1v1 or, 2v2v2, 4v4v4, whatever team size it is, if there's 3 groups left, whether that's, parties or individuals, the first 2 to fight often will lose to the one that third parties. So always in endgame, be mindful of, how much you're expending to get in a fight and how much focus you're giving that fight. Because if you're paying way too much attention or too tunnel vision on a kill, or investing too much resources, whether it's HP, heals, mobility items, you're making yourself an easy target and you need to be prepared to deal with those third parties. So in endgame, a lot of times just rotating is going to be the better play. This game is so situational, though. It's hard to give blanket advice, but just you need to always be mindful of the zone and how many people are left alive, more so than just getting 1 individual kill. But that is going to be it for this video. As always, if you guys did find this to be helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.